The desert moon hung low over the jagged cliffs of Zorath Prime, casting silver light across the rocky landscape. Shadows stretched long and thin over the dunes, and the wind carried a dry, gritty chill that cut through Kale's worn jacket. Kale crouched behind a sharp-edged boulder, his bow ready, fingers steady on the string. He had been tracking the alien warrior for days, following the trail of devastation left in T-Rexel's wake. Villages looted, supply caravans burned, colonies terrified. Kale had heard the stories, the whispers of a creature faster, stronger, and smarter than any human soldier. Yet here he was, alone, prepared, and determined. Humans had survived wars on countless planets, storms that swallowed entire cities, beasts that no one else dared to face. Tonight, Kale told himself, humans would survive again. The wind shifted, carrying a faint scent of alien musk and scorched sand. Kale's eyes sharpened, scanning the dunes. A movement caught his attention, a tall figure slightly hunched, moving with both caution and pride. Even wounded, T-Rexel's stride was confident, a predator's grace masked by pain. Kale's pulse quickened, but his breathing remained calm. This was not a reckless hunt. It was strategy, patience, and precision. He adjusted his aim, letting the moonlight illuminate the curve of the warrior's armor. Each detail mattered: the position of the alien's hands, the limp in his left leg, the way his claws dragged slightly across the sand. Kale had learned that to survive, he needed to understand his enemy completely. T-Rexel stopped for a moment, sniffing the wind, his triangular head tilting as though he could sense Kale even from behind the rock. Kale's fingers tightened around the bowstring, his knuckles white. The arrow he nocked was special, a human-made tip designed to pierce the toughest exoskeletons. He had studied alien biology for months, preparing for this moment. Humans were not known for kindness in war, but Kale had learned to combine intellect with instinct. He drew the bow slowly, aligning the shot, feeling every muscle in his body tense and ready. Then the alien turned slightly and Kale saw it, an expression he did not expect. Despite the armor, the pride, and the aura of fearsome power, T-Rexel's face showed pain. Not rage, not anger, but raw, undeniable pain. Kale hesitated for a fraction of a second, long enough for the desert wind to whistle through the cliffs. And then, without a word, he let the arrow fly. It struck true, embedding in T-Rexel's shoulder with a sickening thud. The alien staggered, claws scraping the sand, eyes wide in shock. Kale approached cautiously, every step measured. He had expected a fight, perhaps a scream, maybe even an attack from the wounded creature. But T-Rexel did something unexpected. He fell to one knee, his massive chest heaving, and a harsh, guttural voice echoed in the silent desert. "Please, don't leave the arrow in." Kale froze. The words were clear, perfectly understandable, and in that moment something shifted. The alien warrior, feared across galaxies, was begging, not for life, but for mercy, for help. Kale felt a strange mix of respect and disbelief. Most enemies begged because they were weak. T-Rexel begged because he was brave enough to trust a human with his life. Kale knelt slowly, careful not to startle the alien. His mind raced. Humans were trained to kill efficiently, decisively, without hesitation. But there was a choice here, a rare chance to show something else: patience, skill, and even compassion. Kale touched the alien's shoulder, feeling the heat of the wound beneath the armor. T-Rexel flinched but did not resist. "If you leave it, I cannot survive alone," the alien admitted, his voice rough and uneven. For the first time, Kale truly looked at his prey, not as an enemy, but as a living being, proud and noble despite the blood and fear. In that desert under the silver moon, the hunter and the hunted shared a moment of fragile understanding. Kale realized then that survival was not just about strength or weapons. It was about courage, heart, and the unexpected moments where choices defined who they truly were. Kale took a deep breath, bow lowered but ready, knowing the night was far from over. The hunt had begun, yes, but it was no longer just about killing. It was about facing fear, witnessing honor, and deciding whether humanity's legendary courage could save a life no one else dared to touch. Kale knelt beside the alien warrior, T-Rexel, feeling the heat radiating from the wound. The arrow had lodged deep in the alien's shoulder, twisting slightly with each shallow breath he took. The desert was silent except for the faint hiss of wind over the dunes, but in that quiet, Kale could hear the warrior's uneven heartbeat, the ragged inhalation of air. Every instinct in Kale screamed to finish the job and move on. This was a human way of survival, but his eyes lingered on T-Rexel's face. There was pain there, yes, but also pride, and a strange glimmer of hope. "Why help me?" T-Rexel rasped, his voice hoarse and broken. His clawed hands twitched, struggling against the sand. "Most humans kill without thought, you hesitate." Kale's lips tightened. "Because I'm not most humans," he said simply. He reached forward carefully, his fingers brushing against the arrow shaft. T-Rexel flinched but did not pull away. "I know how to remove it without killing you," Kale explained. "But you need to stay still. Can you do that?" The alien nodded once, sharp and deliberate, though his claws scraped the sand nervously. Kale positioned the arrow between his fingers, pressing gently against the alien's armor. The alien hissed, a sound somewhere between pain and warning, yet allowed Kale to work. Humans had learned to survive by mastering fear, and in this moment Kale realized that the alien did the same. Both hunter and hunted understood strength, courage, and the silent language of life. Slowly, Kale twisted the arrow. T-Rexel's body tensed, claws digging shallow grooves in the sand. "Do not break it inside," the alien gasped. Every syllable carried pride and desperation, a mix Kale had never encountered in any battlefield before. Kale worked deliberately, careful not to snap the tip. Each moment felt like an eternity, the kind of tense silence that made the desert seem larger, emptier, and full of unseen dangers. Finally, with a faint pop, the arrow released. T-Rexel collapsed slightly against Kale, his massive chest heaving as relief and pain mingled. The warrior's amber eyes glimmered under the moonlight, and for a moment Kale thought he saw gratitude, something entirely alien and raw. "I expected death," T-Rexel said quietly. "Yet you spared me." Kale nodded. "I've survived too long to not know mercy when it counts." He helped the alien shift to a sitting position, inspecting the wound. The arrow had nicked the shoulder joint but not severed anything vital. If treated, T-Rexel could survive, but alone in the middle of this desert, he would die before dawn. The alien glanced around nervously. "I cannot move far. Predators, they smell weakness." Kale's gaze followed the line of dunes. He knew T-Rexel was right. Zorath Prime's deserts were home to creatures far deadlier than humans or aliens, hunting in packs, sensing the tiniest tremor in flesh. To leave T-Rexel here was to condemn him. Yet to stay would slow Kale, expose him to dangers he had no reason to face. But Kale made a choice, as humans often did when faced with impossible odds. "I'm not leaving," he said firmly. T-Rexel's head tilted in disbelief, muscles relaxing for the first time since Kale had shot him. "You, humans are strange," the alien murmured. "Most would kill, others would flee, you stay. Why?" Kale shrugged, feeling the weight of both responsibility and instinct. "Because sometimes survival isn't about being alone, and sometimes even enemies deserve a chance." The words felt heavier than any weapon, yet carried a strange warmth. T-Rexel looked at him, eyes reflecting moonlight and pain, understanding that the human's courage wasn't just in strength or skill, it was in heart. For hours they stayed there, side by side in the cold desert, Kale tending the wound as best he could. T-Rexel spoke little, but when he did, it was about distant planets, battles lost, victories won, and the pride of his species. Kale listened, learning more than any human could from war journals or intelligence reports. In that exchange, Kale felt the strange bond that could form only between two beings who faced death together, yet chose life for one another. When dawn's pale light crept over the horizon, T-Rexel finally attempted to rise. Kale offered his hand, helping the alien to his feet. "We need to move," Kale said. "The desert isn't safe." T-Rexel's eyes flicked toward the rising sun, a mixture of determination and vulnerability shining through. "Then, we move together," he said. And in that moment the hunter became more than a survivor and the prey became more than an enemy. Both had found an unexpected ally in the vast, merciless desert of Zoreth Prime. The sun had barely risen over Zoreth Prime, painting the desert in harsh gold and orange hues. Kale and T-Rexil moved slowly across the dunes, each step a test of endurance. The sand burned their feet despite their boots, and the wind carried fine grit that stung eyes and scraped skin. T-Rexil leaned heavily on Kale, his wounded shoulder causing him to stumble. The alien had always been a hunter, a warrior feared across galaxies, yet now he depended on a human for survival. The shift was subtle but profound, pride mixed with necessity, fear mingled with trust. Kale kept scanning the horizon. The desert was alive with danger. Predatory creatures lurked in hidden valleys, sand serpents twisted beneath the dunes, and packs of skeletal hunters roamed the cliffs. Each step forward was a calculated risk. He had survived planets where storms could tear cities apart, yet even he knew that one wrong move here could mean death for both of them. Still, Kale refused to slow, refusing to let the alien fall victim to the merciless desert. T-Rexil's voice broke the silence, rough but measured. "Humans strange," he muttered, glancing at Kale. "You save me, yet I am your enemy." "Why?" Kale shrugged, adjusting his grip on the alien's arm. "Because enemies can teach you more than allies, and because mercy is a weapon too if you know how to use it." T-Rexil's amber eyes flickered with curiosity, and Kale realized that the alien was learning more than just survival. He was learning a new kind of courage, one rooted not in strength or aggression, but in restraint and thought. Hours passed, the sun climbing higher, relentless in its heat. The desert's silence was broken only by the scrape of claws in sand and the occasional hiss of distant predators. T-Rexil limped, his breathing uneven, but he refused to collapse. "I have survived worse," he said through clenched teeth, and Kale could see the truth in his statement. The alien had faced warriors stronger than humans, storms fiercer than this, yet the pain in his body was nothing compared to the pride in his eyes. It was that pride, Kale thought, that made T-Rexil human in a way humans themselves often were not. By mid-afternoon, a sudden rumble shook the ground beneath their feet. The desert seemed to come alive. Kale froze, scanning the horizon. From the shadows of a distant canyon, a pack of shadow beasts emerged, their elongated bodies moving in perfect synchrony, eyes glowing like embers. They had smelled weakness, the scent of a wounded warrior and a human unaccompanied by a colony. T-Rexil hissed, claws scraping the sand, muscles coiling for defense. "We cannot fight them together," Kale said, gripping a makeshift spear he had carried for emergencies. "We can only outrun them. If we split, one of us dies." T-Rexil's eyes narrowed, and for the first time Kale saw doubt flicker across his proud features. Yet he did not argue. Together, they sprinted toward a ridge, sand flying beneath their feet. Kale adjusted his pace, allowing T-Rexil to lean on him while dodging jagged rocks and sudden drops. The predators were relentless, snapping jaws and venomous tails just a few meters behind. Kale's heart pounded, not with fear but with the sheer thrill of survival. This was humanity in action, quick thinking, courage under pressure, and unshakable determination. Finally, they reached a narrow canyon where the beasts could not follow. They collapsed, chests heaving, sand coating every inch of their bodies. T-Rexil glared at Kale, his pride wounded more by dependence than exhaustion. "You save me again," he said, voice low but sincere. Kale gave a small grin. "And you would do the same for me if the roles were reversed." T-Rexil studied him, silence stretching between them. Slowly, the alien's gaze softened, trust replacing suspicion. As the desert sun began to descend, Kale realized something profound. They were no longer hunter and hunted. They were partners in survival, bound by necessity, courage, and a fragile respect that neither fully understood yet. The journey ahead would be treacherous, but Kale knew one truth. Sometimes the greatest weapon was not steel or arrow, but the ability to trust, to protect, and to stand together when the odds were stacked impossibly high. And in that moment, under the scorching sky of Zoreth Prime, Kale felt an unfamiliar warmth in his chest, a human heart recognizing the soul of a warrior from a world beyond their own. Kale and T-Rexil moved cautiously through the narrow canyon, the walls rising like jagged teeth around them. Shadows stretched unnaturally in the fading light, twisting and merging with the rocks. Every footstep echoed, reminding them both that danger could be anywhere. The desert outside had been harsh, but this canyon was something different, a labyrinth of stone where predators could strike without warning. Kale's instincts were on high alert, and T-Rexel's amber eyes scanned every shadow, muscles tensed as if ready to spring. "Stay close," Kale whispered. "One misstep and we're easy prey." T-Rexel grunted in acknowledgement, leaning slightly on Kale as they moved. His wounded shoulder ached with every stride, but he refused to slow. Pride burned brighter than pain. Kale noticed it, realizing that this alien strength wasn't just in battle, it was in endurance, in refusing to yield even when every muscle screamed to stop. Humans had the same stubbornness, the same will to survive, and perhaps that was why they understood each other so quickly. Suddenly, the canyon floor shook. Kale froze. A low rumble echoed from deep within the rocks. Dust rained from the ceiling as massive shapes emerged from hidden crevices. Rock predators, creatures built entirely from jagged stone with eyes like molten lava, blocked their path. Kale's heart raced. He had seen many deadly animals on countless worlds, but these were something else entirely. They moved with terrifying precision, sensing every vibration, every breath. T-Rexel hissed sharply, baring fangs that gleamed in the dim light. "They will kill us both," he growled, voice rough but steady. Kale nodded, eyes scanning the uneven terrain. There was no way to outrun them in the canyon. The only option was to fight or to use their minds. Humans survived not just with strength but with strategy. Kale reached into his pack and pulled out a set of small explosive charges. "We don't have time for a long fight," he said. "Cover me." The alien warrior's claws flexed. "I trust you." That simple statement struck Kale more than any words of loyalty from his own kind. Together they moved carefully, luring the rock predators toward a narrow choke point. Kale's hands were steady, positioning the charges with careful precision while T-Rexel used his body to guide the creatures' movements, hissing and snapping, making them follow the human's plan. With a final click, Kale detonated the charges. A thunderous roar shook the canyon as stones erupted in showers of dust and debris. The predators screeched and stumbled, blinded and disoriented. Kale and T-Rexel didn't pause. They ran, sliding down steep paths, leaping over jagged rocks, hearts pounding. When they finally stopped, lungs burning and muscles screaming, both were coated in dust, sweat and grime, but alive. T-Rexel's amber eyes shone in the dim light. "Humans," he breathed, voice rough but filled with something Kale had not heard before. "Aw, you fight with mind and courage, not only claws and strength." Kale gave a small, tired smile. "That's what humans do. We survive with more than muscle." For the first time, the alien warrior allowed himself to relax, leaning on Kale as they climbed to higher ground. The canyon stretched below them, a maze of shadows and danger they had navigated together. In that moment, Kale realized that the bond between them was no longer fragile. It was forged in fire and fear, in courage and trust, and in the knowledge that together they could survive worlds that neither could conquer alone. As night fell and stars sparkled over the canyon walls, Kale glanced at T-Rexel. The alien warrior's pride was intact, but tempered now with humility. "We are not enemies," T-Rexel said quietly. Kale nodded. "Not anymore," he replied. And in the stillness of the canyon, the human and the alien shared a rare understanding. Survival was not just about skill or strength, but about the choice to protect and trust one another when the universe offered no guarantees. The desert beyond was still vast and danger still lurked, but Kale felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. Together they could face whatever came next. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on Zorath Prime, turning the desert into a furnace. Kale and T-Rexel trudged through the dunes, each step heavier than the last. T-Rexel's shoulder throbbed and Kale's muscles ached, but neither complained. Survival demanded forward motion. The vast emptiness stretched around them, silent except for the whispering wind. Yet beneath that silence, Kale felt the desert itself watching, waiting to test their limits. Without warning, the wind shifted violently. Sand whipped through the air, stinging skin, blinding eyes, and making each step a battle against nature itself. Kale raised his arm, shielding his face while keeping a firm grip on T-Rexel. "We need cover," he shouted over the roaring storm. The alien warrior hissed in agreement, his pride battling against his vulnerability. "Lead human," he gasped, his voice strained. Kale's jaw tightened. This storm was no ordinary weather. It was a trial, a reminder that the universe respected neither strength nor courage alone, only preparation and resilience. They spotted a cluster of jagged rocks forming a natural overhang. Kale guided T-Rexel toward it, the wind tearing at their clothes and hair. Every step required brute force, coordination, and trust. The storm pressed on from all sides, carrying more than sand and tiny shards of jagged minerals that could cut through flesh if unshielded. Kale moved instinctively, pulling T-Rexel close and turning his own body to block the worst of the blast. The alien's amber eyes locked on his, and Kale saw both fear and gratitude in their depths. Humans often survived alone, but this moment reminded him that strength was multiplied when shared. Once they reached the overhang, Kale and T-Rexel huddled together, pressing against the rocks for stability. The storm raged for what felt like hours, each gust threatening to sweep them into the barren desert. "We will not die," T-Rexel muttered through gritted teeth. Kale nodded, feeling the truth in the alien's words. Death was possible, yes, but surrender was not. Human determination, Kale realized, was not measured by size or weapons. It was measured by will, endurance, and the refusal to give up even when every force of nature tried to crush you. As the storm began to subside, faint shapes emerged in the distance. Predators drawn by the chaos prowled the dunes. Kale squinted, calculating. They were faster but heavier, less agile than humans, and their senses could be fooled. "We need to move before they reach us," he said, grabbing a small makeshift spear from his pack. T-Rexel rose slowly, testing his wounded shoulder. Pain flashed across his face, but determination hardened his features. "I trust you," he said simply. Kale gave a firm nod, the bond between them stronger than ever. Together they moved through the post-storm desert, leaving false tracks, using the wind and debris to cover their passage. Every step was a careful calculation, balancing speed and stealth. Kale marveled at T-Rexel's resilience. This warrior, feared across galaxies, adapted quickly to human strategies, learning not just to survive but to survive together. For the first time, Kale felt the alien's respect was genuine, not forced by circumstance. Night fell and the temperature dropped sharply. Kale and T-Rexel found a small cave, sheltering them from the freezing wind and the predators now prowling further away. The silence was thick, almost comforting after the storm. Kale tended to T-Rexel's shoulder again, cleaning small abrasions inflicted by sand and stone. The alien winced but did not complain, trusting the human completely. "You humans," T-Rexel said quietly, voice trembling slightly from exhaustion. "You endure all fear, pain, death, yet you go forward." Kale looked at him, exhaustion mirrored in his own eyes. "That's what we do," he said softly. "We survive, and sometimes we survive for someone else too." T-Rexel's gaze softened, understanding dawning like the first light of dawn. For the first time since their journey began, Kale felt a flicker of hope. They had survived predators, storms, and wounds together. And in that fragile hope, he realized something profound. Survival was not just about strength or skill. It was about heart, courage, and the willingness to face the impossible alongside someone else. As they huddled together in the cave, the desert night stretching endlessly beyond them, Kale and T-Rexel both knew the journey ahead would be harder. But they also knew that together they could endure anything. The first light of dawn crept over Zorath Prime, casting the canyon walls in hues of orange and crimson. Kale and T-Rexel emerged from the cave, muscles stiff and eyes wary. The desert had tested them with storms, predators, and wounds, but the hardest trial was yet to come. Trust. The fragile bond that had grown between hunter and prey, human and alien, was about to face its ultimate test. The terrain ahead was treacherous. Sharp cliffs loomed above them, jagged rocks cutting across the dunes like broken teeth. Kale could see the faint tracks of patrols, aliens from T-Rexel's own faction, searching for him. Their presence meant certain death for T-Rexel if captured and danger for Kale if he stayed to defend him. The human's instincts screamed to flee, but he refused. "We move carefully," he whispered. "Step by step. No sudden moves." T-Rexel nodded, the trust between them heavier than the desert wind. As they navigated the cliffs, T-Rexel stumbled, his wounded shoulder tearing open slightly. Kale grabbed him instantly, steadying the alien warrior. "You can't do this alone," Kale said, voice low but firm. T-Rexel looked at him, eyes flickering with pride and vulnerability. "I never thought I would rely on a human," he admitted. Kale allowed a faint smile. "And I never thought I'd be saving a galactic warrior today." Suddenly the sound of movement echoed from above. Alien patrols had spotted them. Kale felt his heart rate spike, but his mind remained sharp. Humans survived because they could adapt under pressure. "We split," he hissed. "I'll draw them off, you climb higher, don't hesitate." T-Rexel's amber eyes narrowed. "Leave you?" he asked, voice tinged with disbelief. Kale shook his head. "You survive, that's what matters. We both survive, we'll meet again." The alien hesitated, then, with a silent nod, obeyed. Kale turned to face the patrols, heart steady despite fear. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for T-Rexel, for trust, for something larger than survival. The aliens attacked with precision, their energy weapons cutting through the air. Kale ducked and rolled, using the jagged rocks as cover. His human instincts guided him. Aim for weak points, use the terrain, don't give them the upper hand. Bullets and energy bolts flew past, some narrowly missing him, but Kale kept moving, every step calculated, every breath controlled. Meanwhile, T-Rexel scaled a narrow ridge, the desert wind whipping around him. His claws dug into the rock as he climbed, muscles trembling with pain. The alien realized the human's courage was not just bravery, it was intelligence, strategy, and an unshakable will. Humans could be small, fragile, even unarmed, yet they carried a power that went beyond physical strength. T-Rexel understood now why humans had survived countless wars and planets. After what felt like hours but was only minutes, Kale used a clever maneuver, leading the patrols into a rocky chute. With a precise throw, he dislodged a boulder, sending it crashing down. The patrols scattered, some injured, others fleeing. Kale was battered and bleeding, but alive. The desert was merciless, but his resolve remained unbroken. By the time T-Rexel reached the top of the ridge, he found Kale waiting, leaning against a rock, bruised but alive. "You," the alien began, voice trembling with emotion. "You risked yourself for me?" Kale gave a tired smile. "Humans survive, and sometimes we survive for others. That's what makes us dangerous." For the first time, T-Rexel let himself feel something he had long denied: gratitude, awe, and respect for a species he once thought weak. He stepped down beside Kale, placing a clawed hand lightly on the human's shoulder. "Then, we are allies," he said quietly. Kale nodded. "Allies," he echoed. And in that simple word, the desert around them seemed less hostile, the canyon less treacherous. Together, human and alien, they had survived the trial of trust, stronger than before, ready for whatever lay ahead. The first light of dawn painted Zoreth Prime in soft gold, washing the jagged cliffs and dunes in a fragile warmth. Kale and T-Rexel stood on a ridge overlooking the desert, silent for a moment, each catching their breath after the trials that had tested every ounce of strength, courage, and trust they possessed. The desert, once a barren enemy, now seemed almost peaceful, as if acknowledging their resilience. T-Rexel flexed his claws, testing his wounded shoulder. The pain was still there, but muted, manageable. Kale watched him, heart swelling with a strange pride. This warrior, feared across galaxies, had survived storms, predators, ambushes, and the desert itself, and now he stood beside a human, alive because of human ingenuity, courage, and mercy. For the first time, T-Rexel's amber eyes reflected something more than pride. They held respect, awe, and understanding. Kale broke the silence. "You'll survive now," he said softly. "The desert can't stop you, and your people, maybe now they'll understand that humans are more than they think." T-Rexel's gaze shifted to the horizon, amber eyes softening. "Humans," he murmured, his voice low, almost reverent. "You are more than warriors. You endure, you think, you act with purpose. You saved me, yet risked all. That is strange but honorable." Kale smiled, feeling the weight of the moment. "It's what we do. We survive, and sometimes we survive for someone else, even someone we were supposed to kill." T-Rexel's expression changed, a mixture of humility and wonder. "Then I have underestimated your kind, and perhaps feared you too little. The galaxy should learn to respect humans, not just fear them." Kale nodded. "Fear fades, respect lasts. That's the human way." For a long moment, neither moved. The desert stretched endlessly below, quiet but alive. T-Rexel studied Kale, recognizing the strength that went beyond muscle, speed, or weapons. It was the courage to act when most would hesitate, the clarity to see life and death not as absolutes but as choices. It was the heart of humanity distilled into one man, a man willing to protect an alien warrior in a world that expected betrayal, cruelty, and death. Finally, T-Rexel spoke again, his voice steady and deliberate. "You are my friend, human, and I your ally." Kale extended a hand. The alien hesitated, pride warring with trust, and then placed his clawed hand in Kale's. The contact was brief but powerful, sealing a bond forged in fire, pain, and shared survival. "Allies," Kale repeated, a word heavy with meaning in the endless desert. They descended from the ridge together, moving toward safer lands. The desert wind had calmed, carrying only the faint whisper of shifting sand. Every step forward was lighter, freer. They were no longer hunter and hunted, prey and predator. They were two beings, different species, united by the most universal instinct of all, the will to survive and the courage to protect one another. As they walked, T-Rexel looked back once at the desert behind them. The dunes, cliffs, and hidden dangers were no longer enemies. They were monuments to a journey completed, a trial survived. "Humans," he said softly, almost to himself, "perhaps we have much to learn from you, and perhaps the galaxy should listen." Kale chuckled softly, the sound echoing through the canyon. "We don't always expect thanks, just survival is enough." The horizon brightened, signaling the start of a new day. Kale felt the heat of the sun on his face and the quiet hum of life in the desert. T-Rexel, beside him, carried a wounded body but a stronger spirit. Both had been tested to the limit, yet both had endured together. And in that endurance, the human and the alien understood a truth deeper than fear, stronger than hatred, and more lasting than any victory. Courage and mercy could create legends, and respect could span worlds. For the first time since the hunt began, Kale allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Not just for surviving, not just for defeating threats, but for proving something far more powerful. That humanity, its courage, its mercy, its unshakable heart, could inspire even the fiercest warrior in the galaxy. As they disappeared into the golden horizon, side by side, the desert seemed to hum with a quiet acknowledgement. Humans had survived, and in doing so, they had earned respect where fear had once reigned. And for Kale, that was victory enough.